Welcome in. What is going on? It is Thursday afternoon, week 3, starting tonight with the Steelers and the Browns, if you can stomach it. I am Matt Verderame alongside Ben Heisler. Heisler, how you doing? Do you partake in the action for tonight for that game?
Yeah, I'll partake. I'll probably put together a couple small plays. It's really the only way. I think we're finally at the point, Verderame, where we're getting back to that Thursday night football. The Steelers and the Browns
It's not
total
good.
38 and a half. Like, it's one of those, like, all right, well, I could get some other shit done around the house. I
Right.
could, watch something that my wife actually wants me to watch with her. Like, this is sort of those give or take type of games that we're used to seeing on Thursday night. Like last
Yes.
week spoiled us, but now we're going to start moving back in that direction again where
Yeah.
you have some serious choices to make. So thank God for betting.
Amazon lied to us by playing Chiefs Chargers week 2, and they're like, listen, we're new, we're different, it's going to be fun. And everybody's like, man, all right, going to be a good game. And then it was a good game. It was a really entertaining game. And then at the very end of the telecast, like, by the way, Steelers Browns next weekend. Okay. Now, the good news is week 4, it's the Bengals and the Dolphins. So that should be an interesting game. But week 3, we've all got to suffer through it together. I know you said it was 38.5 for the game.
Yeah, it's pretty low.
It's still take the under. Those teams are awful.
Well, not only that, but there's going to be pretty sizable wind in Cleveland tonight. And a lot of people are like, well, with rain or with snow, you're going to always want to gravitate towards the under. Turns out wind is much more of a factor when trying to deal with some of these totals. It's already been on the move. If anybody jumped on it at either 40 and a half, congrats to you. But yeah, 38 and a half, I still think the under is the play. If you're looking on board for tonight. By the way, over at BetSided, you can find we got same game parlay picks for tonight, updated betting previews and predictions, props. So whatever you need to help yourself stomach your way through this game, we have for you at BetSided. Also, one quick thought too, Verderame. I don't know if you caught this at the end of the of the Chiefs and the Chargers game, but on the show we talked about how the line was the Chargers plus 4.5. Did you hear how excited Al Michaels sounded the moment Justin Herbert and half of his cracked ribs threw that meaningless touchdown at the end of the game? It was very evident that he was on the Chargers plus 4.5. And you know what? He didn't feel like he had to hide it from anybody.
We can go to the Chiefs in a second. There's a great story with Al Michaels from Super Bowl 29 when the Niners played the Chargers, and the Niners were like an 18-point favorite in the game. Paul Tagliabue, who was the commissioner at the time, told Michaels, this is per Al Michaels' book, by the way, is like, don't mention the line of the game because it's huge, it's embarrassing, and we want people obviously to tune in, stay tuned in. And it was either the first or like third play from scrimmage. The Niners throw a long touchdown pass. And Michaels just, I'm paraphrasing, said something to the effect of like, well, might cover that spread pretty quickly at this rate. Like, infuriated Tagliabue. So Al Michaels is very aware of the line at all times. He's a little bit of a gambling man. Speaking of lines, look, we're going to get to everything in this game. Obviously, Chiefs at Colts. The line was 6. First of all, it opened at 3 as an early line. Then it jumped all the way up to the Chiefs being favored by 6.5. Last I saw, I checked late last night, it was 5.5. Is that still where it is?
Still where it's at right now. In fact, some books actually had the Chiefs as high as 7. And I'll be honest with you, I knew that there was a lot of trends that were likely to favor the Colts. We had talked a little bit on Stacking the Box on Tuesday about this game, that the line at the time was 6.5, and it still felt a tad bit high, even with how bad the Colts have been. So I kind of expected that the Chiefs were going to be such a public team this week that the line would keep creeping up and up and up and up, stay at 7, maybe as we get closer to kickoff, get to 7.5, but that hasn't been the case. It's moved back in favor of the Colts. So more often than not, you think based on what we've seen from both these two teams so far, that's sharp money coming in on the Indianapolis side. Chiefs are 5.5, as you mentioned. If you want to get the Colts on the money line right now at FanDuel, you can find them at plus 215. And the total right now currently sits at 50.5. So we're always used to seeing the Chiefs probably in that 50 to 54 range. Currently the case this week, but not the highest game on the board.
I am very interested in this game for a variety of reasons. I mean, obviously, first of all, the Chiefs are involved, but secondly, like I look at this game and I think there's two ways to me. whether you're a fan or a bettor or whatever, that you're thinking about this game. You've got to fall into one of the two buckets. One of them is, man, the Colts have looked awful. They've been so bad. And if the Chiefs just come out and play a reasonably good football game, they're going to beat them by double digits. Like, that's the one bucket. The other bucket is you look at this and go, look, they can't be any worse. Like, the Colts have to play better. It's a home opener. They're desperate as hell. Might get Michael Pittman back this week. He practiced limited on Wednesday. Like, they can't be any worse than this. And so even if the Colts lose, they're probably going to lose a close game because they're going to play their asses off. And so you're going to have that desperation factor. Now, you can fall in either bucket, and I can hear the argument. But I think you got to fall in one of those two. I don't think there's an argument for why you think the Colts are better. Like, well, they're not better. So you either think they're desperate as hell and they're just going to find a way to either cover or flat out upset the Chiefs in the game. Yeah. Or you think, look, the Colts have been so atrocious that Kansas City's just going to go in there, play a B-plus game and win, 33-20 or something like that. I mean, I don't know where you fall, but I think that's got to be one of the two stances on this game.
Yeah, I'm of the belief that the Colts are not this bad. And we've talked about it on previous shows that the Colts under Frank Reich typically start very slow, and there's a reason behind it. He's now on his fifth quarterback in 5 years. The trends over the last several years have indicated that Frank Reich covers the spread, wins at about a 40 to 45% clip in the first 5 games of the NFL season. And then all of a sudden that number from week 6 on goes to about the 63 to 68% range. Like, all of a sudden they flip a switch and they're a far improved team. You also see it more out of Jonathan Taylor. He was so dominant during the stretch, and that kind of opens up everything for the rest of the offense, right? You talked about how you just weren't sure what the Colts offense was going to be besides Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor this year. That was a main concern. It still looks like a main concern. I think what's been more fascinating to me is that the defense, moving from Matt Eberflus to Gus Bradley, has really looked bad. Now, they also didn't have Shaq Barrett. Shaquille Leonard. That's still Darius to Shaquille is a transition for me, but that's obviously a major missing piece. There's a good probability that he'll be back this week. Pittman is likely to be back this week. So all of a sudden now you're back at home. Ryan, obviously the indoor-outdoor stats for him tend to much more favor him indoors. So again, another indication that he should play better this week.
They're indoors in Houston.
Yeah, they put up a few points, but he wasn't a disaster in the Houston game the way that he was in Jacksonville, right? And sure. And that's a trend that goes back for years. The Colts have not won in Jacksonville since 7 years now. Now going on 8 years. You can't really put that on Frank Reich for years that he wasn't there, but in 2 of the years that he was the head coach of the Colts, Jacksonville was the worst team in the league, and they got the number 1 draft pick. So there needs to be something that's fixed here. And I think that level of desperation will be there from Indianapolis. The 5.5, though, is troubling because it's right in that sweet spot. I liked it at 7. You can get that full touchdown advantage. There's an opportunity for a backdoor cover. The Chiefs showed you last week that when you let teams hang around or you start off slow and you have to fight back, more often than not, trying to cover a bigger number is not going to work out well for them as well. This is a very tough game right now, I think, for me to handicap. And I think because of the fact that I was able to jump on the Colts early at +7 is probably where I want to be. So this feels like a game to me too, Verderame, that if anything, I'd probably consider betting live as opposed to trying to figure out this weird in-between number that we're seeing on both sides.
So I've gone back and forth on this a million times because I'll be blunt. I think the Chiefs are going to win this game. I don't know if it'll be by 3, if it'll be by 10, but I think they're going to win this game. So if you said to me you have to bet something, I would just bet their money line, which is not a huge win. I understand that, but that's probably how I would go. I might also bet the under as a total because I don't think the Indianapolis Colts are going to score a ton of points. Look, I went back and I looked. For people, by the way, who are interested in this kind of stuff, Pro Football Reference, I think, does incredible work. They have everything charted out. Okay. So I went back and looked and tried to find, like, here are a few things, right, that, like, to me, encapsulate why the Colts have struggled. So on offense, the Colts rank as the 4th worst offense in the red zone. They've had 7 trips. They've had 2 touchdowns, 28.6%. Okay, they're tied with Minnesota, actually, for 4th worst in the league. Meanwhile, if you're wondering, Kansas City is 6th best. They've gone to the red zone 9 times. They've got 7 touchdowns out of it. Defensively, when you look at the red zone, okay, the Colts are dead last. They're the only team to not get a stop in the red zone. Teams have only been in there 3 times, but they've given up all 3 for touchdowns. Okay, Kansas City, by the way, has also been awful in the red zone, 6 of 8 against. So that is something to watch in this game. But here's the stat that really jumped out at me more than anything. But I thought the red zone defense was interesting with Indianapolis, especially. So drives against, points per drive against. The Colts are middle of the road. Okay, the Colts are sitting there right at 1.76. Chiefs are 1.96. They're almost back-to-back, 15th and 18th. So, okay, that's average. Offensively, for the Colts, points per drive, the Chiefs are tied with the Bills, best in the NFL, 3.10.
Yeah, they've been
the Colts are dead last, 0.83. The problem for Indianapolis has not necessarily been the defense. The offense has been brutal. They cannot score. Now, defensively, look, they do have one problem in this game that I also think is going to rear its head big time. Gus Bradley is their defensive coordinator. Okay, Gus Bradley was the defensive coordinator last year for the Raiders. And if you remember in those games, Gus Bradley's very famous for playing his cover 3 defense. That's what he does. That is a single high safety defense with the corners on the outside. It's all deep thirds. Okay, the 2 corners in the middle safety. And the strong drops down. They play a zone underneath. Well, that was great when you had the Legion of Boom. Okay, and you had the most talented secondary on earth. The Colts are talented. They're not that talented. And last year's Raiders defense was not talented at all. And the Chiefs hung 89 points on the Raiders in 2 games. And Mahomes threw 7 touchdowns with no picks. And the Chiefs won both those games going away. Now, Bradley, if he sits in that defense against Kansas City in this game, it will be a bloodletting. If they sit in a cover 3 and they just play a zone underneath and this spot drop zone, which just all it means is basically you're just getting to a spot on the field as a Colts defender and sitting there. If they do that against Kansas City, they will get smoked. I firmly believe that. So my question in this game is, will Bradley come out of that a little bit? Notoriously, he does not blitz, but he's actually blitzed at the 12th highest rate this season. Mahomes is the second most blitzed quarterback in the NFL through 2 weeks. The only guy who's gotten blitzed more is Carson Wentz. So will Bradley, who's actually blitzed a lot more this year, will he blitz more against the Chiefs or will he not? The other thing to keep in mind is even though the Colts have blitzed at that high of a rate, 12th in the league, you would think that would lead to a lot of pressure. It hasn't. Despite blitzing to that level, the Colts only rank, as I pull it up right here in front of me, the Colts only in pressure, they only rank 27th in the league. 18.3% of the time they get pressure. They only have 3 sacks on the year. Okay. So you wonder in this game, does Bradley say, look, I'm going to keep blitzing even though I haven't had the results, or is he going to revert back to what he knows best?
It's a fascinating question. And you mentioned Mahomes' numbers against Bradley. In 7 games, 17 touchdowns, 2 interceptions.
It's not gone well for him. No.
Not gone well at all. And at some point, if you're Gus Bradley, you have to come to a realization that if I don't change, it's adapt or die. So right now, what they are showing is a tendency to blitz, but I also think it's because they're just trying to create some sort of pressure in the turnover game. Colts aren't forcing turnovers. That was a staple of Matt Eberflus. In the years that he were there, the Colts were top 10 in takeaways every year. And when we talk about takeaways, normally it's a stat that if you're a top 5 team one year, you're very much likely to regress the season after. It's just not a stat that's always sustainable. But the way that Eberflus coaches with the hits principle and following from the Rod Marinelli, Lovie Smith tree is takeaways. Like you chase after the ball. The moment you see it on the ground, even if it's a dead play, your eyes go to it. It's just something that's inherently taught and learned and understood. And I know that there was mixed feelings about when Eberflus took the Bears job, but what you can say is that Chicago has done a much better job taking the football away. And you're starting to see it in their defense and the way that it's applied. With Bradley, just hasn't been the case so far. So I think he's trying to find something that will get some positive momentum back on the Colts side. Having Leonard back could make a major difference. But again, Mahomes knows this defense. I think if anything, what Bradley needs to do is just try to disguise some coverage. Like, even if you're going to go back to the single high safety, make it seem like you're going to bring him in. Make it seem like the safety's coming in on blitz. Have Mahomes try to change the play, and then you're able to adapt to how he's trying to change it. So they just need to have confusion. That's really what they need. Mahomes is going to read the defense as well as anybody. But I think if Bradley is going to have success against Mahomes when in the previous 7 times hasn't found any. That's going to be one thing that he has to do very much, at least in this game. A couple other trends, by the way, too, Verderame, that I want to bring up. I saw this from Trey Wingo over at Caesars. He mentions that Pat Mahomes, pretty remarkable stat when you think about the company that he currently continues to keep and pass up. Mahomes is 13-0 in his Chiefs career when Kansas City is favored on the road. Only Troy Aikman in the 1990s had a better start to his career in those games. He ended up winning his first 16 games. Also in the month of September, we've talked about how good Kansas City is. But the Colts are terrible in September lately, 5-10-1, 7-8-1 against the spread in September. Converse that with the Chiefs that are 13-2 straight up compared to 9-6 against the spread with Pat Mahomes as their quarterback. There's something about the way that Kansas City starts the season, the way that the Colts start the season. And again, you start to wonder, okay, well, why is the line still moving in Indianapolis's direction based on everything that we know about these numbers for Patrick Mahomes?
I really, the more I think about this game, the more I almost disassociate a little bit and go, you know what? Look, like sometimes you can just outthink yourself and you can overthink things. The Chiefs are just a much better team than the Colts are. Like they're just better than them.
Yeah.
I mean, I would argue the Chiefs are a vastly more talented team on offense. They have better special teams. Although, of course, if Bucker can't play, there's a hit to that. But they're still better on special teams. They defensively, I mean, is there that big of a difference between these two teams? I know Willie Gay's not playing. I understand that. But even with that being said, like if I'm the Chiefs, I'm basically saying to myself, the only way I'm losing this game, other than just turnovers and a million penalties, is Jonathan Taylor going for about $150. Because if I can stack the box, okay, and I can bring a safety down, what are they doing? I mean, the problem for me with the Colts is a couple things. The Chiefs have played some very mobile quarterbacks. Ryan's a statue. It's not going anywhere, right? So, like, if you're Indy, you got to run to win. If you can't run, you're done.
I think that's fair. Like he's going to have to get the ball out quick. Part of what we're going to talk about some of our favorite prop bets for this game as well coming up in just a second. But I always think about the way in which you just try to slow down Kansas City. Yep. If you're the Colts, you need a big Jonathan Taylor game, right? Like you have to. His rushing total projection is 84.5 yards. Has not come out yet over at FanDuel, but consensus line for him right now, 84.5. If Taylor's touching the ball, first of all, it kind of depends on what you feel the game script is going to be, right? If you think the Chiefs blow them out, because that's what's happened to the Colts the last couple of weeks, then you take the under there. But if you believe this is a closer game the way that the odds makers do, by putting Kansas City at 5.5 and moving them from up to 7 down to 5.5,
right,
it's likely an indicator that Taylor is getting upwards of 20 to 25 touches, maybe even more. Perhaps he gets into the end zone 1 or 2 times. You're looking at a big game out of him. So that prop in particular, I think, is predicated on how you expect this game script to go. If you expect a close game that's going to go down to the wire, that might be a little lower scoring than the 50.5 on the board. Because you know what I mean? The Colts right now can't afford to get into a shootout. They just can't.
They'll lose. They'll get killed.
They'll lose. They need to control time of possession. They need Jonathan Taylor to wear down the Chiefs' front four. They need to be able to just be able to flip the field on them, control special teams. And if you believe that's going to be the case, then Jonathan Taylor should have a big day. And so that's part of where I think you have to try to figure out what the game script likely looks like before you start looking at some of your props.
I'll tell you what, I'll throw out this. This is probably not going to happen, but I really feel that way in this game, or this way in this game.
Yeah.
Whoever wins the toss, usually teams these days, they just defer. I would take the ball. Because if I'm the Chiefs, I'd be like, I'm getting up 7-0 on you. And I'm immediately putting pressure. If the Chiefs get up in this game by 2 scores, I think this game's over. The Colts just have no ability to throw the football. None. And their offensive line is not good. Matt Pryor is a disaster at left tackle. The Chiefs can just unload. And they can blitz because they don't have to double cover somebody. They don't have to keep 2 safeties back in this game. The Chiefs can just aggressively go after them. If I'm Spagnuolo, I'm telling the offensive side of the ball, hey, look, get up 10 points. At that point, Taylor becomes less and less of a factor, especially as, of course, the game goes on. And to me, the Colts have one avenue of winning this game. They have to keep it very close so that Taylor can constantly be a factor. The second he's not a real factor anymore and they have to go away from him, this game's done. So if I'm the Colts, I'm feeling like, look, I've got to get up. I've got to get ahead or a bare minimum be within a score the whole game. Because once this game, if it becomes 20-7, in my opinion, it becomes an avalanche. Then you start getting to where it's like, now it's a 3-and-out. Now you've got to punt because you're not built to play that way. Now it's 27-7. Well, now you've really got to throw. If you're the Colts, you need to stay in the game or ahead in this game. And if you can't do that, it's just an avalanche the other direction. They're not built, even if Pittman plays and Pierce plays, they're not built to do that. They're not the Chargers. If the Chiefs had gotten up 10 points on the Chargers, which actually happened in reverse, the Chargers got up on the Chiefs. That game's a perfect illustration, right? Those two quarterbacks are built in a way, and those two offenses are built in a way that you can erase 10 points in 5 minutes.
Right.
The Colts are not built to do that. They're not built to play a game that gets into the high 20s and the 30s. And if Kansas City scores a couple early and it becomes a game where it's like, well, we can't run the ball now as much. We've got to have Ryan predictably drop back and throw.
Right.
That's a wrap. I don't think at that point the Colts are going to win or cover the spread. So I think the Colts have to play this game in a certain way. And if they can't do it, I think it's lights out.
I agree with you. One other note from this game too, as well. When it comes to the total, total is 5-0 in overs for the Chiefs in their last 5 road games. So again, something to consider when you're looking at this number of 50.5. Also, the over is 8-2 in Kansas City's last 10 games overall. Again, I think you won't have to necessarily worry about Kansas City doing their part. It's more along the lines of whether or not the Colts will. Because if the Colts are scoring points, Kansas City should be able to match them. It's just a question of whether or not Indianapolis will have any sort of firepower on the offensive side of the ball. I do expect their defense to play better. You want to go over a couple props for this game?
Let's do it. It's Barty.
Okay. Let's start with, and again, FanDuel, where we like to use the odds. Again, you can go over to Arrowhead Addict, find some of the best ways that you can get in on some of the promo bonuses that they have ahead of week 3. That's all available over at Arrowhead Addict. You also find it on BetSided as well. So these odds are not available over at FanDuel just yet. They're available at a couple other sports books, and DraftKings has them. We'll go ahead, and for anybody that's a Discord member over at Arrowhead Addict, I'll drop these plays in here as soon as the show is over. But let's start with the Chiefs, the guy that kind of let us down last week, and Jerick McKinnon. We both thought he was going to be much more involved in the passing game. Wasn't the case.
Had a touchdown.
But
not the yardage.
Touchdown, but not the yardage. So they're still using him, and he's still outsnapping Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But I also expect to use him, especially on the fast turf in Indianapolis, to try and get him out in space against the Colts defense, that if they aren't going to blitz, that's a weapon for them, right? You can use him in a variety of ways in the screen game. You can use him as an inside rusher to be able to try and break a crease. I expect his rushing yards to be better this week. Probably his receiving yards too. But I think 14.5 is kind of predicated on the fact that Edwards-Helaire has had some of these big runs. But based off of McKinnon's time and snaps on the field, Colts have had some issues stopping the run this year, and McKinnon can get over 14.5 on one run. So to me, Verderame, I think at minus 110 odds, Jerick McKinnon over 14.5 rushing yards feels like an easy play this week.
I like it. Also, by the way, I just saw on Twitter via Warren Sharp's handle that Gus Bradley's talking about that he feels that his defense last year held down the Chiefs, and that he actually feels pretty good about cover 1. So that's good. So I'm actually going to bet the Chiefs at the adjusted line of minus 87 because if he really feels that way and he's not just like saying this to be facetious, okay, have fun. McKinnon, yeah, I think that's smart overall. Like you said, all it takes is literally one crease, and he's got 15 yards.
Yeah, exactly. So I think McKinnon gets it done on the ground this week. I think they'll try to get him a little bit more opportunities, not just as a receiver, but also as a rusher. And the snaps indicate that as well. I also expect to see a little bit more from Paris Campbell. The Colts are starting to look his way a little bit more. It's the early portion of the season. He hasn't been lost for the regular season as of yet. You need splash plays against Kansas City's defense to remain on the field. I think especially if you try to move him around a little bit, knowing that you're getting play action with Jonathan Taylor. If their running game is working, Paris Campbell can be a very versatile weapon for him. His total is set at 25.5 receiving yards. The speed in which Campbell has on the outside, and also if you move him into the slot, especially with no Willie Gay, I'm not sure who matches up against him, especially in the middle of the field. Campbell feels like he's going to see a few more targets this week, so I like the over on 25.5 receiving yards for him.
Fair enough. I actually don't know how confident I am in that, based on, like, I've heard for 2 years that Paris Campbell's going to be good. Can Paris Campbell actually just be good ever at any point?
He has to show up first. You're right.
I mean, Paris Campbell is the definition of my father's old saying of, like, potential is a fancy word for saying you've never done shit. Because if you've done something, you don't have potential anymore. You're just good.
Right.
Like Paris, the same thing. Like, look, now Alec Pierce is a rookie. He's played one game. But I heard all off season how, like, Alec Pierce is going to be this dominant player for them. And then they get into the Houston game and he literally does absolutely nothing the entire game. Like, I am curious to see how it shakes. Not a bad play by any means, because you wonder in this game if the Chiefs are just going to say, look, we're taking the Michael Pittman out and we're doubling it. And that's it. Like, he's not going to beat us. And you're going to have to go everywhere else. And if they go everywhere else, then Campbell's a pretty good play at over 25.5.
So that's the second one. The third one that I have on this list is playing around a little bit with the total, because we've seen for a long time that all the trends indicate that the over is going to hit, that Mahomes has been dominant on the road, that he's got 17 touchdowns, 2 interceptions against Gus Bradley's defense.
Right.
And yet the line continues to stay low. I think, especially if we're putting this together in a same game parlay, and I did the math for these 3 picks. So over 19.5, I moved Campbell's receiving yards down from 26.5 down to 19.5. McKinnon 14.5, and then the over on 45.5 for alternate total points in this game. So all this game needs to do is hit 46 points total. 23-20 game makes you a winner. This is a same game parlay, a 3-way parlay that will pay out at plus 280. So all you're asking for is a big run from McKinnon, one big play from Paris Campbell across the middle, and then over 45.5 on the total. I think those 3 together make for a really solid same game parlay where you're really not putting a lot of risk, but a $25 bet in this situation is going to pay almost 3-1 odds.
I like it. I like the adjusted over, because I think the line right now, the total is about what it should be. And I like the game to be at about 30-17. Something like that, 30-20, which would be under the actual total. But if you adjust the total and you take the parlay, then yeah, I like it. By the way, you might know or have it in front of you. If you don't, no worries. But what is the total from Mahomes in this game?
I can tell you in just a quick second as I'm going ahead.
I'll filibuster here for a second. But I think like, just based on Gus Bradley, I can't express how confident I am in the over. I really, if he comes out and plays a single high, any team that does that just gets killed every single time they do it. And yet teams still do it. You have the total in front of you?
For Mahomes on the game, let's see, looking at, had it and then I lost it. Passing props, here we go. So Pat Mahomes is projected, I'll give you Ryan's too, because I think the discrepancy is interesting. So Pat Mahomes passing yards 289.5 compared to Ryan, which is just 243.5. Touchdowns from Mahomes. Go ahead.
What is Mahomes again?
289.5 for passing yards. Ryan 243. Ryan over 1.5 for touchdowns. Mahomes over 2.5. Interceptions. They both are just over 0.5. Honestly, I'd probably bet the over on both of them to throw a pick in this game as well. So that's the numbers that you're seeing right now for both Mahomes and for Matt Ryan.
I would take the over on those passing yards in a heartbeat.
For both of them, or just Mahomes?
For Mahomes. Ryan, I think it depends on the game structure, so I'll stay away on him. He could go over, he could go under. Mahomes, how many times is Mahomes, and this would actually be a fun little exercise, I'll let out either one of us is the time. How many times has Mahomes gone under twice in a row on passing yardage? It can't be often. And
it's not happened in a while.
He did not play.
Maybe a couple times last year when they were just having some issues scoring the ball the way that they're used to.
Right. I agree. That'd probably be when it would have happened. He has not played particularly, or he did not play particularly well in week 2. Had a couple of balls that could have been picked that weren't. Okay. He had a couple of great throws, had a couple of ugly throws. If Gus Bradley sits in cover 1 in this game and they just spot drop these guys underneath, he will go over that total by the end of the third quarter. I of all the bets you could make in this game, the line, the total, that's my most confident bet.
So
he will clear 290 by the end of the third quarter.
So what I would tell you then is that there's a lot of sites, and I know FanDuel offers this as well, live in-game props. If you're like from the first drive, and again, I'd probably wait a little bit because the Chiefs have been so good at scoring on their first drive. But if you start to notice that he's staying in that traditional coverage throughout most of the game, in the first quarter even, and say the Chiefs have a punt or the Colts end up scoring, that would be a great time to maybe jump on not just even the over for the game, because then you're relying on Indianapolis. Just jump on the Chiefs live team total instead. Get them at like 24.5 or whatever it might be over the course of it, because that's going to set up very, very nicely. And you already have the hindsight of knowing the type of coverage that Gus Bradley is going to play. So for anybody that's watching this, if you like a side, but you're just not sure as to whether or not what you're anticipating is going to be what happens, that's the beauty of betting live as well. You have the ability to go and look at your app and see to yourself, okay, like Gus Bradley said in the same coverage he's always sat in, but Mahomes hasn't attacked it yet. He will. And now I'm going to go ahead and jump on a better line than what I got at pregame. So definitely something to consider. You have a best bet for the game, Verderame?
The Mahomes line. I think
he's going to overdo. Okay, so we're going to go with.
Honest to God, I think he's going to do it by the end of the third quarter.
All right, I'm putting that down on the board when we bring it back next week. Our picks actually went pretty well last week. Overall, 3-2 from last week. I took the Colts at +7. I was hoping that line would get to +7.5. It's now at 5.5. So for anybody that's considering the other side, I'd probably wait. If you want to take the Colts, especially if Kansas City gets the ball to start, that's probably the time to do it. The moment that Kansas City gets their opening drive touchdown, get on Indianapolis at 8.5, 9.5, whatever that live line would end up being. But I will say the Colts keep it a little bit closer than most people anticipate, even if Mahomes puts up some of those big numbers. So I'm at Colts +7, and then we also have our props for the show as well. Over 19.5 Paris Campbell receiving yards, over 14.5 rushing yards for Jerick McKinnon, and we're taking the alternate total of over 45.5. Three-way parlay pays out at +280. So a $25 bet would pay out $95 for you.
Awesome. Well, I picked the score exactly last week, 27-24. I will say Chiefs 30-20. I think they will win this game. I think they'll handle business. I do not think it'll be easy, but I think they will win. All right. You got to get out of here. You got to go on the radio. I have to get out of here because you're getting out of here, so that's fine. Listen, everybody, thank you for watching today. This is Chiefs Best Bets with Ben Heisler. Try saying that 5 times fast. Of course, you can check out Ben's work at BetSided. You can always check out my work at Fanside. You can check us both out at our Twitter handles that were on the screen, at Benny Heiss and at Matt Verderame. So I will be back later today with Patrick Allen. We'll be talking plenty more football. But until then, till 4 o'clock Central when we're back, I'm Matt Verderame. He's Ben Heisler. This has been Chiefs Best Bets. Thanks for watching.